Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt, is remembered not only for her crown and her kingdom, but for the two legendary love affairs that shaped the destiny of the ancient world. First, her bond with Julius Caesar, and later, her deep passion for Mark Antony. These romances were filled with power, politics, and dreams of empires, yet they also carried with them betrayal, scandal, and tragedy. Tonight, I will take you through the gentle telling of her story, slowly, calmly, and quietly, so that as you listen, your mind can rest and your eyes can grow heavy. But before we drift together into the past, I invite you kindly to press the like button if you enjoy these soft and simple histories. Leave a comment if you wish. Share this with someone else who needs a quiet night, and don't forget to subscribe so that more peaceful stories find their way to you. Do all of that now, before your eyelids grow heavy and sleep carries you away. Now, take a deep breath, settle into comfort, and let us begin. Cleopatra VII was not an ordinary queen, and her story with Julius Caesar was not an ordinary love affair. It was a meeting of two of the most remarkable figures of the ancient world, each driven by ambition, intelligence, and a hunger for power. But to understand how their paths crossed, we must begin with Cleopatra's desperate situation when she was still in her early 20s. She was born in 69 BC into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek family that had ruled Egypt since the days of Alexander the Great. By the time she became queen at the age of 18, she was no stranger to the brutal politics of her family. Siblings were rivals, marriages were arranged within the dynasty, and betrayal was common. Her father, Ptolemy XII, had left the throne to both Cleopatra and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, as was the custom, but the boy's advisors quickly seized control. They treated Cleopatra as an enemy rather than a co-ruler, and within a few years she was forced into exile. It seemed her reign had ended before it truly began. Driven out of Alexandria, Cleopatra found herself wandering in the harsh desert with a handful of loyal followers, while her younger brother sat on the throne in the capital. Yet Cleopatra was not the kind of woman to surrender. She had been educated in philosophy, politics, and languages. Unlike many members of her dynasty, she spoke the Egyptian language fluently and understood how to charm her subjects. She knew her strengths lay not only in her beauty, which ancient writers exaggerated endlessly, but in her intelligence and charisma. She was determined to win back what was rightfully hers. And then fortune shifted in her favor. In 48 BC, Julius Caesar, the most powerful Roman general of his age, sailed into Egypt. He was 52 years old, at the height of his influence, fresh from victory in Rome's civil wars. But his rival, Pompey the Great, had fled to Alexandria seeking refuge. Cleopatra's brother, or rather his advisors, murdered Pompey, hoping to win Caesar's favor. Instead, they disgusted him. Caesar was not impressed by the treachery, and worse, he soon found himself in the middle of Egypt's royal family feud. For Cleopatra, this was her chance. She knew that if she could secure Caesar's support, she could regain her throne. The problem was that she could not simply walk into Alexandria. Her brother's forces controlled the city and watched every movement. To reach Caesar, she needed cunning and daring. This is where legend enters the story. Ancient writers, including Plutarch, tell us that Cleopatra had herself smuggled into Caesar's palace wrapped in a carpet, or some say a linen sack. The bundle was carried past guards by one of her loyal servants and delivered directly to Caesar's private chambers. When the carpet was unrolled, Cleopatra stepped out, radiant, bold, and unafraid. Imagine the scene. The young queen, only 21, standing before the most powerful man in Rome. Dressed in her finest robes, her eyes gleaming with determination. Caesar, weary from war and politics, suddenly confronted with this daring woman who risked everything just to stand before him. It was not only her appearance that impressed him, but her audacity. Few women, indeed few rulers, would have dared such a gamble. In that moment, Cleopatra had already won a victory. Their connection was immediate.
Caesar was a man who admired intelligence and courage, and Cleopatra possessed both in abundance. She was witty, charming, and highly educated, capable of speaking with him about politics, philosophy, and strategy. She did not behave like a supplicant, but like a partner. And in the days that followed, their relationship grew into both a personal and political alliance. Caesar agreed to support her claim to the throne. This was not merely out of affection, but also practical. Egypt was enormously wealthy, the breadbasket of the Mediterranean, and Caesar needed Egypt's grain and riches to strengthen his position in Rome. Backing Cleopatra ensured that Egypt would remain a loyal ally, not a hostile rival. Their affair, then, was as much about strategy as it was about passion. War soon followed. Caesar fought against Cleopatra's brother Ptolemy XIII and his supporters in the streets of Alexandria. The city became a battlefield. Cleopatra remained by Caesar's side throughout the campaign. In the end, Caesar's forces prevailed. Ptolemy XIII drowned in the Nile while attempting to flee, and Cleopatra was restored as queen. She was officially married to another younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, as tradition demanded, but everyone knew that the true ruler of Egypt was Cleopatra herself. For Cleopatra, the rewards of her affair with Caesar were immense. She had regained her throne, secured her kingdom's independence, and gained the protection of the most powerful man in the world. But there was more. In 47 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to a son. She named him Ptolemy XV, Philopator Philometor Caesar, but the world would know him simply Caesarion, Little Caesar. This child was the ultimate symbol of Cleopatra's triumph. Through him, her dynasty was now tied to Rome's greatest general. Caesar never publicly acknowledged Caesarion as his heir, but Cleopatra believed deeply in his legitimacy. To her, he was proof that Egypt and Rome were bound by more than politics. They were bound by blood. Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar did not end with her victory in Egypt. She traveled with him along the Nile, showing him the wonders of her land. Ancient accounts suggest they sailed together for weeks, perhaps even months, on a grand barge, enjoying a kind of royal honeymoon. Cleopatra displayed Egypt's wealth, its temples, and its traditions, ensuring that Caesar saw her not just a lover, but a powerful queen with a rich and ancient culture behind her. In time, she traveled to Rome with her young son. Caesar welcomed her there, installing her in a villa across the Tiber. For Cleopatra, this was the height of her influence. Few foreign rulers were ever treated with such honor in the heart of Rome. Statues of her likeness were even placed in temples, something unheard of for a queen of foreign blood. But this triumph came at a cost. To many Romans, Cleopatra was not a respected ally, but a dangerous intruder. They saw her as a sorceress who had bewitched their great general. The senators despised her influence and whispered that Caesar intended to make himself king, with Cleopatra as his queen. Rome had long hated the idea of monarchy, and Cleopatra's presence seemed to confirm their worst fears. The scandal grew worse when Cleopatra stayed in Rome openly as his companion. His legal wife, Calpurnia, still lived there, yet Cleopatra walked through the city as if she were Caesar's true partner. Roman society fumed, but Caesar was unmoved. He continued to honor her, to host her as his banquets, and to keep her close. Cleopatra enjoyed these years in Rome, basking in her power and prestige, but the storm clouds were gathering. Caesar had made too many enemies. On the Ides of March in 44 BC, he was struck down by a group of senators who feared he aimed to become a king. Cleopatra, still in Rome, suddenly found her world collapsing. With Caesar dead, her greatest protector was gone. The advantages of their affair vanished in an instant. Worse still, her very connection to him made her a target. She hurried back to Egypt with her son, aware that the political situation in Rome was too dangerous for her to remain. The cons of her affair were now painfully clear. She had tied her throne and her dynasty to one man, and when he fell, she was left exposed. Caesarion, though she loved him dearly, was not recognized in Rome as Caesar's heir. Instead, Caesar's nephew Octavian claimed that position, and Caesarion's very existence became a threat to him. The child who symbolized Cleopatra's greatest hope also carried the seeds of future peril. Yet, for all the risks and consequences, Cleopatra's affair with Julius Caesar had given her everything she had dreamed of when she first wrapped herself in that carpet and dared to meet him. It had given her back her throne, secured Egypt's independence, and, for a time, placed her among the most powerful figures of the ancient world. It had made her a partner, however briefly, to the man who ruled Rome. Theirs was not a love story in the simple sense. It was a union of ambition and necessity, passion and politics. Cleopatra was no helpless seductress, as Roman propaganda would later claim, but a queen who used every tool at her disposal to survive and thrive in a world dominated by men. Caesar, for his part, found in her not only a lover, but a ruler who could match his intellect and charisma. When she returned to Alexandria after his death, Cleopatra knew the game was not over. She had lost her greatest ally, but her ambition remained unshaken. Rome would not leave Egypt alone, and she would once again need to seek protection from its generals. Years later, she would find that protector in Mark Antony, leading to another chapter of passion, power, and tragedy. But before Antony, there was Caesar. Before the defeat at Actium, before her fateful death, Cleopatra's story began with that bold night when she stepped out of a rolled carpet and captured the heart of the Roman world. That affair was her first great gamble, a gamble that lifted her to greatness and set the course of history for both Egypt and Rome.
Cleopatra's first affair with Julius Caesar had secured her throne, given her a son, and placed her for a brief moment at the center of Roman politics. But when Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March in 44 BC, everything changed. She returned to Egypt with her little boy, Caesarion, and watched from a distance as Rome plunged into another civil war. For a few years, she ruled carefully, avoiding entanglement while Caesar's assassins battled his allies. But Cleopatra knew Egypt's fate was tied to Rome's destiny. Sooner or later, she would be forced to choose a side. By 41 BC, that moment arrived. The Roman world was divided between Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir, and Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general and longtime friend. Together with a third man, Lepidus, they formed the Second Triumvirate, ruling the Republic as a three-headed dictatorship. But tensions soon grew between Octavian and Antony. Antony took control of the eastern provinces, while Octavian dominated Rome itself. It was in this world of shifting alliances and bitter rivalries that Cleopatra would meet the second great love of her life. Mark Antony was a man of immense charisma and legendary appetites. He was a skilled commander, loyal to his soldiers, and known for his rough humor and love of feasting. He was also impulsive, extravagant, and easily swayed by desire. At the time of their meeting, he was in his early 40s, a seasoned warrior who had fought alongside Caesar for years. Cleopatra, now 28 years old, was more experienced, more calculating, and more determined than ever to secure Egypt's independence. Their meeting took place in the city of Tarsus in Cilicia. Antony summoned Cleopatra to answer accusations that she had supported Caesar's assassins. The queen understood that this was not merely a summons, but an opportunity. If she could win Antony's favor, as she once won Caesar's, Egypt would again be protected. And so she prepared one of the most famous entrances in history. She sailed up the Cydnus River on a magnificent barge with golden sails and silver oars. The decks were strewn with purple, the color of royalty, and Cleopatra herself reclined beneath a canopy dressed as the goddess Isis. Perfumes filled the air, and attendants fanned her with ostrich feathers. Musicians played, while servants scattered flowers on the water. To the people of Tarsus, it seemed as if a goddess had descended from the heavens. Antony was stunned. This was not a queen begging for mercy, but a monarch arriving in divine splendor. From the beginning, Cleopatra had Antony exactly where she wanted him. He was captivated not only by her beauty, but by her wit and confidence. Like Caesar before him, he discovered that Cleopatra was far more than a seductress.
She spoke with intelligence, she laughed with charm, and she matched his excesses with her own grandeur. When he invited her to dine with him, she refused, insisting that he come to her banquet instead. There she outdid him in luxury, feasting him with exotic dishes, endless wine, and dazzling displays of Egypt's wealth. Antony was enthralled. Their affair began quickly, but it was not only passion that bound them together. Cleopatra needed Antony's power to keep Egypt safe from Rome's control, and Antony needed Cleopatra's riches to fund his ambitions in the East. For both of them, it was a union of necessity as much as desire. But unlike her calculated relationship with Caesar, this time Cleopatra seemed to find true companionship. Antony was different from Caesar, less cold, less cautious, more indulgent, more reckless. With him, Cleopatra could be both a queen and a woman. That winter, Antony followed her to Alexandria. The city became their playground. Together they formed what came to be known as the Inimitable Livers, a society of pleasure where they feasted, drank, and played games late into the night. They disguised themselves as commoners and roamed the streets, testing their subjects' loyalty and reveling in mischief. Cleopatra delighted in Antony's humor, while he marveled at her intelligence and command. For a time, they seemed to live outside the world's politics, wrapped in their own extravagant romance. Yet politics could not be ignored. Cleopatra gave birth to twins in 40 BC, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene. Later, another son, Ptolemy Philadelphus, would follow. These children bound Antony to her forever. While he returned to Rome at times, even marrying Octavian's sister Octavia for political reasons, his heart and his loyalties remained in Egypt. Cleopatra's influence over Antony grew so great that many in Rome began to whisper against him. They claimed he had abandoned his Roman heritage, that he had been bewitched by a foreign queen, that he was enslaved by luxury and lust. Octavian, ever ambitious, spread rumors that Antony planned to make Alexandria his new capital and crown Cleopatra as queen of the world. Roman propaganda painted her as a dangerous enchantress, a threat to the Republic itself. But for Antony, Cleopatra offered more than passion. She offered legitimacy in the East. In a famous ceremony known as the Donations of Alexandria, Antony declared Cleopatra Queen of Kings and distributed eastern territories to her children. Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, was proclaimed the rightful heir of Caesar himself. To the Romans, this was an outrage. To Cleopatra, it was a triumph, the culmination of her lifelong ambition to secure her dynasty's future. Yet the cons of this love affair were beginning to outweigh the benefits. By aligning himself so closely with Antony, Antony made himself an enemy of Rome's most powerful man. The rivalry between them grew into open war. Octavian portrayed himself as the defender of Roman tradition, and Antony a traitor under the spell of an Egyptian temptress. The people of Rome, already suspicious of Cleopatra, rallied behind Octavian. The decisive moment came in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet faced Octavian's forces in a naval confrontation off the coast of Greece. Cleopatra herself commanded part of the fleet, but when the battle turned against them, she retreated with her ships. Antony, torn between love and duty, abandoned the fight to follow her. Their forces crumbled, and the war was lost. They returned to Egypt, their empire of dreams reduced to ashes. For a time, they tried to live as they once had, but the shadow of Octavian loomed larger. In 30 BC, Octavian invaded Egypt. Antony, defeated and despairing, fell on his sword, dying in Cleopatra's arms. With his death, Cleopatra faced the end. She tried once more to negotiate with Octavian, but when it became clear that he intended to parade her as a captive in Rome, she chose to end her life. According to legend, she arranged for a venomous asp to be smuggled to her chambers, and with its bite, she joined Antony in death. Their affair, like their lives, was both magnificent and tragic. For Cleopatra, it had brought wealth, children, and a partner who matched her in extravagance and ambition. Together, they had ruled as king and queen of the East, daring to challenge Rome itself. But the price was the fall of her dynasty, the end of Ptolemaic Egypt, and her own death. For Antony, it was love that cost him his honor, his power, and his life. Yet even in defeat, their love affair has endured through the centuries as one of history's greatest romances. Cleopatra and Mark Antony were more than lovers. They were partners in a grand vision, a dream of an Eastern empire independent of Rome. That dream perished at Actium, but their story lives on, a tale of passion, power, and downfall, as unforgettable as the queen and general who dared to live it.